right, class, listen up. We are talking about how to measure for drapes. Now, you may think this is an insignificant thing, but if you're considering installing new drapes in your room, you need to start with the right measurements to get you off on the right foot. Now, you can hire someone to come in and take those measurements for you, but normally a service call costs about $75. So I'm going to teach you how to save that money and put it towards your fabric, which can be expensive, or the labor to make sure that your drapes end up being installed perfectly and the right length. Now, there's a few simple rules of thumb that I follow, and this is a good example of how I like drapes to look when they are installed. I think they look beautiful, and here's what I've done. As far as the rod goes, first of all, you want to figure out how high you want your rod to be. That's the first measurement. What's the height of your drapes? What I do is I take a measurement that is halfway between the top of the frame of the window and the bottom of either the ceiling or the crown molding. Now, this is because I don't like the drapery hardware to be installed directly into the wood trim. I think it's a much cleaner, more sophisticated look if it hangs above the trim. So that's number one. You want that measurement to be halfway between the top of the window and the bottom of either the ceiling or the crown molding. And that will give you the overall height in inches, because that's the way I don't think in metric, of your drapes. Now, what about hem allowances for both the top of the drapes, the header, and the hem? Well, you can add 18 inches, and that will give you enough fabric to turn under and have a nice deep hem, like a 4-inch hem. Now, this is assuming that you want your drapes just to come to the floor. There's a lot of different rules about how long your drapes should be. These drapes come just about a 1/2 inch off the floor, which gives a really clean, sophisticated, and tailored look. A few years ago, it used to be far more popular for drapes to puddle on the floor, and there's certainly nothing wrong with that. However, if they are being opened and closed frequently, or if they're by a door, you'll find that your drapes end up acting like a broom and just sweeping the dust. So sometimes people prefer to have them just come to the floor, or maybe just break on the floor. Just a little pointer you might want to keep in mind. So now that we've figured out what our overall height of those drapes is, we need to figure out the width. For the width, I like to do the same thing. Take a measurement from the outside of the trim to the outside of the trim of the window, and then add 6 inches per side if the room allows. That means that you take the width of your window and add 12 inches, and there you have the width of the rod. Now, we've got our height, we've got the width of the rod, but how much fabric do we need to buy? Well, in order to do something like this, which is a French pleat, and most curtain treatments require double fullness in fabric. That means that it gives you enough coverage when the drapes are closed that it has a really full look and it has enough fabric. If you go with only 1.5 times fullness, it can sometimes look skimpy and you just don't get that same curving and sort of rippling and folding of the fabric. So you want double fullness, which means that let's say my rod was 100 inches long. I would multiply that by 2 for my double fullness, which gives me 200 inches. Now, how many panels is that? Well, fabric is generally 54 inches wide, and there is a selvage edge down either side that you're going to want to cut off. So once you take that into consideration, you're left with about 50 inches, which means that if I take my 200 measurement, divide it by 50, I'm left with 4 panels to cover the width of my window. Now, that means that I take 4 panels times the overall height, and that will tell me how much fabric I need in inches to make the most beautiful, spectacular drapes of my dreams.